Invoker might be the only video game character that requires a certification from a 60-hour night class in order to play properly. Whenever someone claims that Dota 2 isn't friendly to new players, Invoker is usually among the first to be referenced in that conversation, and who can blame them? With 14 active spells that need to be monitored, each with their own effects, combinations, and cooldowns, Invoker is the manifestation of high risk, high reward. Take out your notebooks, today's lesson is on the history of Invoker. In order to understand the history of Invoker, you first need to understand his gameplay. While all other heroes can level up spells and use them once they have a skill point, Invoker needs to create his spells. He does this by combining 3 different regions, Quas, Wex, and Exhort, and invoking them, creating a spell based on the combination of orbs that he has out. Because of this, skilling up Invoker is also very different from your average run-of-the-mill hero. Each orb has a max level of 7 points as opposed to 4, and Invoke is skilled up differently depending on which patch you refer to. Before turning them into spells, you also gain stats for every orb that you have out. Each spell's numbers, such as damage and effect duration, are affected by the current levels of Quas, Wex, and Exhort. For example, let's take a look at Forged Spirit. The spell requires 2 instances of Exhort and 1 of Quas to be out. Once you hit Invoke, the spell will be available in your arsenal. Actually activating the spell will bring out a Forged Spirit, and its damage will be determined by your current level of Exhort, and its HP will be determined by your current level of Quas. Keep in mind that these values are unique for every spell, though it's not a requirement to remember those numbers, unless you're a nerd! So even though Invoker seems overly complicated in his current iteration with 10 active spells, the first incarnation of Invoker actually requires you to rent out space in your brain to remember all 27 of his skills. Introduced in patch 6.10 on June 6, 2005, I'm pretty convinced you'd have to have the DNA of a calculator to play Invoker properly. Coming into the fray as Kyle the Invoker, the 3 regions would all serve their own unique purpose. Quas would control damage, Wex was for attack speed and move speed, and Exhort was in charge of HP regeneration. In this version, Invoker could only invoke 1 spell at a time, but the order of the regions would affect the type of spell he brought out. For example, Quas Wex Quas would make a different spell from Quas Quas Wex. For the most part, each spell served its own purpose, but a lot of them didn't really have a function and felt more like filler to pad out the rest of his abilities. Not too long after, Kyle was removed from Dota in patch 6.18, only 4 months after his introduction. In October 2007, a full 2 years after Invoker was removed from the game, he would come back in the form of a secret quest. The original Dota All-Stars had a tradition of implementing secret quests into patches ending in 9 like 6.29 and 6.39. In 6.49, Invoker was the focal point, reintroducing him into the minds of the players. The goal of the quest was to find and kill a series of ice frogs which will drop orbs, summoning a mini-boss for each orb dropped. The Orb of Frost will bring out a blue dragon, the Orb of Lightning will conjure a giant wisp, and the Orb of Fire will call out a phoenix. After defeating these 3 bosses, Kyle the Invoker will come out. Upon defeat, he drops an artifact that provides maximum move speed, 5-time critical damage, and a Lincoln Sphere effect without cooldown. So basically an item that a 12-year-old Dennis Atal would design and give to his original characters Do Not Steal to battle on roleplay forums. With that, on February 2008, Invoker was officially reintroduced in patch 6.50, freshly realized with a renewed purpose in life. His lore reveals that the 3 orbs contain the essence of a storm, the heart of a blizzard, and the soul of a phoenix. In this version, Kyle can invoke up to 2 different spells at a time, and the original 27 invocations have been reduced to the more familiar 10, though they have much more synergy and purpose than before. Quas and Exhort also had their functions switched, so now Quas would give HP regen and Exhort would provide damage. Finally, the arrangement of the orbs no longer mattered, so now you can free up that extra brain space to learn an instrument, or much more likely play more Dota. In patch 6.60, Invoker gained an Aghanim Scepter upgrade that reduced Invoke's mana cost to 0 and its cooldown to 2 seconds, allowing for the insane rotation of spells that Invoker is synonymous with today. Around this time in Dota's lifespan, if we received an update from Ice Frog, we may as well have been splashed with holy water by God himself. In the bigger stretches of time between patches, it wasn't uncommon for people to write fake patch notes just to see what they could get away with. In April 2011, a fake changelog for patch 6.72 surfaced on a Chinese website and people all over the Play Dota forums were scrambling. A user ran through the entire forgery through Google Translate for some quick answers, and Kyle's name was mistakenly translated as Carl. After an initial shock, the entire Dota community seemingly bellowed in laughter at the same time and an inside joke was born. Invoker's actual name was Carl. On January 19th of 2012, Invoker made his way into Dota 2 more or less untouched from his previous lifetime from Warcraft 3. From here, Invoker received an update to his lore. While his old self sold his soul to avenge the members of his race, Dota 2's Invoker is a really smart butthole. His form of magic is one based on pure memorization, and only people with clearly high IQs can use them. In a reference to his original 27 spells, the lore reads, he could command no fewer than 10 spells and cast them instantly. Many more he learned but found useless and would practice once then purge from his mind forever to make room for more practical invocations. In one of the earlier drafts of Invoker's lore, it states that his name used to be Garal, a moniker phonetically similar to Carl. Well, about that. Turns out Valve went full madman and made his name officially Carl. Invoker has several audio responses to indicate this.
Throughout the eons, I have been known by many names, but my true name of power is Carl.
If that weren't enough evidence to suggest that Valve doubled down on the joke, both Undying and Morana refer to Invoker by his first name.
Carl, is that you?
Carl, meet Sagan.
As a side note, Invoker does not refer to any other heroes in his voice lines. Strange how a character so infamous and well known wouldn't have that little bit of extra work put into him, but it is pretty befitting considering how arrogant he is. Invoker holds himself in such high regard that he doesn't acknowledge friends or enemies, and it's a nice stylistic touch that needs to have more recognition. So go and appreciate it, please. Since his inclusion into Dota 2, Invoker's skills have mostly received number tweaks. In patch 6.79, Invoke is able to store 2 spells at all levels. In patch 6.84, Deafening Blast releases a wave in all directions from Invoker once Quas, Wex, and Exhort all hit level 7. In patch 6.86, Invoker started with Invoke at the beginning of the game, giving access to one of his spells right off the bat, and a special attribute bonus that added +6 to Strength, Agility, and Intelligence. Patch 7.00 brought down a mighty fist of changes, and Invoker was not spared from the impact. Quas, Wex, and Exhort no longer provided passive stat bonuses, but some numbers were modified in order to offset the modification. A few of Invoker's spells were affected by the talent changes. Since leveling requirements change, Invoke is no longer upgradable, has a 6-second cooldown, and can store 2 spells at any given time. Forge Spirit lost its ability to spawn a second spirit with level 4 of Quas, and instead had it moved to one of the level 15 talents. Deafening Blast had the same treatment, moving the ability to blast in all directions to one of the level 25 talents. In January 2017, the Dark Moon event was announced, a tower defense game similar to Wraith Knight before it. There isn't much new lore implication during this event, but Invoker does make a cameo appearance here as the Scholar of Korix, Mind of Tornaris, and Agent of Galaron. These 3 spin-off Invokers would converge to become the Dark Magus, which is essentially what happens if you allow the entire 1998 Denver Broncos to control Invoker at the same time. To make sure that everyone's nightmares do come true, Invoker was given Cataclysm in 7.07, an alternate way to cast Sunstrike that places 2 random, visible Sunstrikes around every enemy hero upon clicking it twice. Invoker is a hero who can either be a huge benefit in the hands of a competent player, or a guaranteed loss under the control of an overconfident trash lord. Although I suspect that Valve's matchmaking algorithm likes to give me that second guy. Whether you love him, hate him, or spend over $400 on his cosmetics because you want people to think that you're good at Dota by being financially invested in a singular character, I'm Dennis Atal, and that was the history of Invoker.